The colony transport ship Horizon's Promise was burning when the alien vessel found it. Flames danced in the void where there should be no fire. Metal twisted and screamed as the ship broke apart piece by piece. Inside, 300 colonists had already died. Their bodies floated in the dark spaces between the stars. Should have died with them. She was 19 years old. She had dark hair and dark eyes and hands that knew how to fix broken things. She had been traveling to a new colony world with her family. Her mother was a doctor. Her father was an engineer. Her little brother was 12 and afraid of the dark. They were all gone now. Had survived because she was in the engineering section when the attack came. The blast doors sealed automatically. They trapped her in a small pocket of air while everything else burned. She had floated there for 6 hours, breathing slowly, trying not to think about the screaming she had heard before the communications went silent. When the alien ship cut through the hull and pulled her out, she did not feel rescued. She felt hunted. The creatures that took her were tall and thin. Their skin was gray like old metal. They had too many joints in their arms and fingers that bent in wrong directions. Their eyes were black and empty like holes in the universe. They did not speak to her. They did not ask if she was hurt. They simply wrapped her in a field of blue light that locked her body in place and carried her away. The ship they brought her to was massive. It stretched across the stars like a floating city made of sharp angles and cold surfaces. The walls were dark. The lights were dim. The air smelled like chemicals and something else, something that made stomach turn. Later she would learn that smell was fear. The ship had held thousands of prisoners before her. Their terror had soaked into the walls. They brought her to a room with no windows. The floor was metal. The ceiling was metal. Everything was cold. They released her from the light field and she fell hard against the ground. Her body ached. Her lungs burned. But she forced herself to stand. A creature entered the room. It was different from the others. It wore something that looked like a uniform. Its movements were slower, more careful. It studied her the way a scientist studies an insect. "I am Commander Az," it said. The words came from a device on its chest. The translation was flat and without emotion. "You are specimen 848H. You belong to a species called human. We have not collected your kind before." Said nothing, she watched, she listened, she memorized everything. "You will be," as continued. "This process will determine your species' value, whether you are useful as workers, whether you are dangerous as enemies, whether you should be allowed to continue existing at all." He made a gesture with his strange fingers. More creatures entered the room. They carried tools that did not recognize. Some of the tools looked sharp. Some of them glowed with energy. All of them looked like they were designed to cause pain. "Your cooperation is not required," as said, "but it is noted." They started with simple things. They measured her height and weight. They took samples of her blood and hair and skin. They scanned her body with machines that hummed and clicked. They recorded everything in devices that floated near their heads. Then they moved to harder things. The first test was heat. They raised the temperature of the room until skin turned red and her breath came in gasps. They watched how long she could stand before she collapsed. They measured her heart rate and brain activity as she suffered. The second test was cold. They dropped the temperature until frost formed on her eyelashes and her fingers turned blue. They watched her body shake and fight to stay warm. They noted how long it took before she stopped shivering. The third test was pain. They used their tools on her, screamed. She could not help it. The pain was beyond anything she had ever felt. It burned through her nerves like fire and ice combined. But even as she screamed, she watched. She saw which buttons they pressed. She saw which doors they used. She learned. Days passed, or what felt like days. There was no sun in this place. No way to mark time except by the tests. They came at regular intervals, always different, always worse. They tested how long she could go without water. They tested how her mind responded to strange sounds and lights that made her want to tear her own eyes out. They tested what happened when they showed her images of other humans being hurt. That test was the hardest. They had recordings, videos from other attacks, other ships, other colonies, saw people running and screaming and dying. She saw children crying for parents who would never come. She saw things that would live in her nightmares forever. And she felt something change inside her. The aliens had instruments that measured her brain activity. They saw the spike when she watched the videos. They saw how her heart rate increased. They noted it in their files. Pack bonding response, the technician said. The species cares about others of its kind. This can be used against them. They did not understand what they were really seeing. Was not just feeling sadness or fear. She was feeling anger, a cold, quiet anger that settled into her bones like ice. An anger that said, someone will pay for this. An anger that said, I will make them remember. But she did not show it. She had learned that showing things to these creatures only gave them more weapons to use against her, so she kept her face empty. She screamed when they hurt her because she could not stop herself. But she never begged. She never pleaded. She never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her break. On the 5th day, Commander Az visited her cell. You are resilient, he said. There was something in his voice that might have been surprise. Most species beg for death by now. You have not. Looked at him with empty eyes. Would begging help? No. Then why would I waste my breath? Az tilted his head. His black eyes reflected the dim lights of the cell. Interesting, he said. Most species hold on to hope. They believe that if they cooperate, they will be released. You do not seem to believe this. I don't, said. You're going to kill me no matter what I do. I understood that the moment I saw this ship, so I have nothing to lose. She smiled. It was not a nice smile. And Commander, that makes me very, very dangerous. Az studied her for a long moment. Then he turned and left without another word. The tests continued, but now noticed something different. The technicians watched her more carefully. They kept more distance between themselves and her restraints. They had heard what she said. Good thought, be afraid. Because she was learning, every test, every torture, every moment of agony. She was learning their weaknesses, their patterns, their mistakes. And when her chance came, she would make them regret ever finding her. The Dominion had been collecting species for 10,000 years. They had built an empire on the suffering of others. Every world they found, every creature they captured, added to their knowledge. And knowledge, to the Dominion, was power. Commander Az had personally overseen the of 847 species. He had watched creatures with armored shells crack under pressure. He had seen beings of pure energy fade into nothing. He had documented the exact moment when hope died in 1,000 different kinds of eyes. Humans, he had decided, were nothing special. They were soft. Their skin tore easily. Their bones broke with simple force. They required constant temperature, constant pressure, constant chemical balance just to survive. By every measure the Dominion used, they were one of the weakest species in the galaxy. And yet, on the 6th day, the technicians reported something unusual. The human girl's pain responses were not following expected patterns. Most species showed declining resistance over time. Their bodies gave up. Their minds retreated into protective darkness. They became easier to break, not harder. Was becoming harder. Her body was failing. The tests had pushed her past normal human limits. Her muscles were damaged. Her organs were stressed. Blood vessels had burst under her skin, leaving dark bruises across her body. But her mind was sharper than ever. Her eyes tracked every movement in the room. Her hands tested her restraints constantly, probing for any weakness. Increase the intensity, as ordered. I want to find her breaking point. They did. On the 7th day, they took away her sleep. They used lights and sounds and electrical pulses to keep her awake, hour after hour. Her body screamed for rest. Her mind began to blur at the edges, but she did not break. She talked to herself instead, quietly under her breath so the translators could not pick up her words. She recited things she remembered, poems her mother had taught her, engineering formulas her father had made her memorize, the words to songs her little brother used to sing. She held onto herself with words. On the 8th day, they used the isolation chamber. They put her in perfect darkness, perfect silence, no light, no sound, no touch, nothing but the inside of her own skull. Most species lasted hours before their minds began to tear themselves apart. Lasted 14 hours. When they pulled her out, she was shaking. Her eyes were wild, but she was still there, still fighting. How? The technician asked. It was not a professional question. It was genuine confusion. I had company, whispered through cracked lips. There was no one in the chamber with you. Yes, there was. Eyes focused on something far away. My mother, my father, my brother, they were with me the whole time. I could hear them, feel them. She smiled, and it was almost gentle. The dead don't leave us. They wait, they watch, and they remind us why we keep going. The technician had no response. He simply noted it in the file. Subject shows unusual psychological resilience, possible delusion, further study required. But it was not delusion. It was something the Dominion had never understood about humans, something that did not show up in their scans or measurements. Humans were never alone. They carried their people with them, every ancestor, every loved one, every person who had ever mattered. They were all there in the back of every human mind, lending their strength when it was needed most. The Dominion species as individuals. They did not understand that humans were never truly individual. They were pieces of something larger, parts of a story that stretched back thousands of years and forward into infinity. Was not fighting alone. She was fighting with the weight of everyone who had ever loved her standing behind her. On the 9th day, they brought out the neural probe. Had seen it before. They had used it on the recordings, the videos of other humans. It was a device that connected directly to the brain. It let them access memories, feelings, the deepest, most private parts of a person's soul. This will not be pleasant, as said. He almost sounded apologetic, almost. Nothing here has been pleasant, replied. Her voice was rough. Her body was broken, but her eyes were steady. Do what you want. You can't take anything from me that I'm not willing to give. They connected the probe. The pain was immediate and total. It felt like her skull was being opened from the inside, like 1,000 needles were pushing through her brain. But worse than the pain was the exposure. She could feel them moving through her mind, touching her memories, seeing things that belonged only to her. They saw her childhood, running through fields on the colony world where she was born, learning to fix machines with her father, learning to heal wounds with her mother. They saw her fears, the dark spaces between stars, the silence of the void, the moment when she realized her family was dead and she was alone. They saw her loves, the boy she had kissed behind the engineering bay when she was 16, the way her mother's hands felt when she brushed hair, her brother's laugh when she told him stupid jokes. They took it all, they recorded it, they analyzed it. And then they pushed deeper. They wanted to find her core, the thing that made her keep fighting, the source of her resistance. They believed that if they could identify it, they could destroy it. They found something unexpected. At its core there was not hope, there was not love, there was not even anger. There was a promise. It was a memory from years ago, had been 12. Her colony had been hit by a plague. People were dying. Her mother had worked for 3 days without sleep, trying to save them. When asked her how she kept going, her mother had knelt down and taken her hands. You keep going because someone has to, her mother had said. You keep going because giving up means they win, and we don't let them win, ever. Do you understand? She had promised to never give up, to never let them win. And she had kept that promise for 7 years. The Dominion did not understand promises. They did not understand that for humans, some words were more than just sounds. They were chains made of will. They were unbreakable bonds that held a person together when everything else fell apart. They pushed harder. They tried to tear the promise apart. They showed her that resistance was futile, that her family was dead, that no one was coming to save her, that she would die alone in the dark between the stars and no one would ever know. Her heart rate spiked. Her brain activity went critical. Her body began to fail. But she did not let go of the promise. Instead, she let go of something else. She let go of hope. She let go of fear. She let go of everything except the cold, hard core of who she was. She became nothing but will, nothing but the promise, nothing but the absolute refusal to let them win. And her body, pushed beyond all possible limits, finally failed. The monitors screamed, alarms flashed, the technicians scrambled to disconnect the probe, but it was too late. Her heart stopped beating, her brain went silent, her body went limp in the restraints. Commander Az watched the flatline on the monitor for a long moment. Then he made a note in his file. Specimen 848H status deceased. Resilience rating 7.3, higher than expected for physical specifications. Recommend further study of species if additional specimens are acquired. End log. He ordered the body moved to organic recycling. There was no reason to waste resources on the dead. He did not assign guards to watch the body. He did not order continuous monitoring. Why would he? The human was dead. Her heart had stopped. Her brain was silent. Every instrument confirmed it. But Az did not understand humans. He did not understand that for humans, death was not always the end. Sometimes it was just the beginning. The organic recycling bay was cold and dark. It was where the Dominion sent the bodies of their specimens. The dead were processed here, broken down into useful chemicals. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was mourned. Lay on a metal table in the center of the room. Her body was still. Her skin was pale. Her eyes were closed. By every measurement that mattered, she was dead. But the Dominion did not understand human bodies. They did not know about the mammalian dive reflex. When a human body is dying, when the heart stops and the brain begins to fade, something ancient takes over. The body pulls all remaining blood to the core. It slows everything down. It tries to survive just a few minutes longer, just long enough for help to arrive. They did not know about clinical death. Humans had a strange relationship with death. They had learned to bring people back. Their doctors regularly restarted stopped hearts. Their machines could breathe for silent lungs. They had turned death from a door into a revolving gate. They did not know about human will. In the darkness behind closed eyes, something was happening. She was not conscious, not exactly. Her brain was too starved for oxygen to support real thought, but something deeper was still working, something in the oldest parts of her brain, the parts that existed before language, before thought, before anything but the pure drive to survive. Her mother's voice echoed in that darkness. You keep going because someone has to. Her father's voice joined it. Don't quit, we never quit. Her brother's voice, small and scared. Are you coming back? You promised you'd always come back. I promised, something and responded, I promised. The body has memories of its own. Muscles remember movements. Nerves remember responses. And sometimes, when the will is strong enough, the body remembers how to live. At minute 3, a single cell in its heart fired an electrical impulse. It was tiny, barely detectable, but it was there. At minute 7, more cells joined. They were confused, disorganized, firing at random, but they were firing. At minute 12's heart tried to beat. It failed. The muscle was too weak. The rhythm was wrong, but it had tried. At minute 18, it tried again. This time it almost worked. A single weak contraction, then nothing. In the darkness held onto the voices. Her mother, her father, her brother, they were all there. They were all waiting, and they were all telling her the same thing. Come back, we need you, come back. At minute 23 her heart beat, once, twice, then stopped again. At minute 29 it found a rhythm, weak, thready, barely enough to move blood, but consistent, beating. At minute 31 her lungs took a breath. It was a gasp, really, a reflex. Her body trying to pull in air that it desperately needed. Her chest rose and fell, once, twice, then settled into a shallow pattern. At minute 34 blood began flowing to her brain again. The neurons, starved but not quite dead, began to flicker. Random signals at first, then patterns, then something that might have been thought. At minute 37, opened her eyes. She did not see the ceiling of the recycling bay at first. She saw her mother's face, her father's smile, her brother's eyes. They were fading, pulling back, leaving her alone in the cold darkness of reality. But they had done their job. They had called her back. Lay still for a long moment. Her body felt wrong, heavy, broken. Every part of her ached with a deep, bone-level pain. She could feel how damaged she was, how close she had come to staying dead. But she was alive. She was alive, and she remembered everything. The tests, the torture, the probe in her brain, the moment when they had pushed too far and her heart had stopped. She remembered all of it, and she remembered what she had become in that final moment before death. She had become pure will, pure refusal, pure promise. That was still there. The who had been afraid, who had hoped for rescue, who had cried in the darkness of her cell, she was gone. What remained was harder, colder, more dangerous. Slowly, carefully sat up. Her muscles screamed in protest. Her head spun. But she forced herself to move. The recycling bay was empty. No guards, no technicians. Why would there be? The dead did not need watching. Swung her legs off the table. Her feet touched the cold metal floor. She stood, swaying, catching herself against the table before she could fall. She looked down at her body. The bruises were dark against her pale skin. The wounds from the tests were still visible. She was weak. She was damaged. By any reasonable measure, she should not be able to stand. But had moved past reasonable. She took a step, then another. Each one was agony, each one was victory. The recycling bay had tools, sharp things, heavy things, things designed to break down organic matter. Examine them with new eyes, eyes that saw weapons where the Dominion saw equipment. She selected a cutting tool. It was meant for separating flesh from bone. In her hands, it would serve a different purpose. She selected a metal rod. It was meant for moving heavy objects. It would work just as well for breaking fragile alien skulls. She found a uniform in a storage area. It belonged to one of the technicians. It did not fit well, but it covered her wounds. It made her look less like a victim and more like someone who belonged. Caught her reflection in a metal surface. She almost did not recognize herself. Her face was thin. Her eyes were sunken. But there was something in those eyes that had not been there before, a light that burned cold and steady. She was no longer the girl they had captured. That girl had died on the table in the testing room. What stood here now was something else, something forged in pain and tempered in death. Smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. She thought about her family, her mother who had taught her to heal, her father who had taught her to build, her brother who had taught her to protect. They were gone. She could not save them. She could not bring them back. But she could make sure their deaths meant something. She could make sure the Dominion never forgot what they had done. She could make them pay. Moved to the door of the recycling bay. It was not locked. Why would it be? No one expected the dead to walk. She pressed her hand against the panel. The door slid open. Beyond it lay the corridors of the Scourge of Mercy. Somewhere in those corridors, Commander Az was recording his notes. Technicians were analyzing their data. Guards were patrolling their routes. None of them knew that the human girl had come back. None of them knew that death had failed. None of them knew that in 37 minutes, everything had changed. Stepped through the door and into the ship that had killed her. She did not look back. There was nothing behind her but death. Ahead of her, there was only vengeance. The first guard died without making a sound. He was walking his patrol in the lower corridors when stepped out of the shadows behind him. He had time to feel something cold against his neck. He had time to realize that something was wrong. Then he had no time at all. Lowered his body to the ground carefully. She took his weapon. It was a simple thing, a tube that fired bolts of energy. She had watched the guards use them during her capture. She had studied how they worked during her days of testing. Now she would use one herself. She moved on. The corridors of the Scourge of Mercy were dark and winding. They were designed to confuse prisoners, to make them feel lost and helpless, but had been watching for 9 days. She had memorized every turn, every door, every camera and sensor. She knew this ship better than the crew did. The second guard saw her coming. He had time to raise his weapon. He had time to shout a warning, but was faster. She had always been fast. Now, with nothing left to lose, she was faster than ever. He fell. His warning died in his throat. Took his communication device. She listened to the chatter on the ship's network. They did not know she was free. They did not know she was alive. They were talking about routine things, shift changes, meal schedules, a minor problem in the engine room. Good, the longer they stayed ignorant, the more damage she could do. She made her way to the armory. It was guarded by a single door with a simple lock. The lock required a code. Did not know the code, but she had learned something during her testing. She had learned that the Dominion were arrogant. They believed they were superior. They believed no one could challenge them. This made them sloppy. She entered the code that she had watched a technician use on a similar door. It worked. The Dominion used the same codes for everything. The armory was full of weapons, energy rifles, explosive devices, things she did not recognize but looked dangerous. Took what she could carry. She strapped weapons to her body. She filled her pockets with explosives. She became a walking arsenal. She should have been afraid. She should have been shaking with terror. She was one human against a ship full of aliens. The odds were impossible. But fear required hope. Fear required something to lose, had neither. She had only purpose. The engine room was next. It was the heart of the ship. Without power, the Scourge of Mercy would be helpless. Did not want to destroy the ship. Not yet. She wanted it functional. She needed it for what came next. But she wanted them to know she was there. She set the first explosive near a secondary power conduit. It would not cripple the ship. It would just hurt it, just enough to get their attention. She set the timer and moved on. The explosion came 3 minutes later. The ship shook. Alarms began to wail. The chatter on the communication device became frantic. What happened? Explosion in engineering. How? We have no enemies in this sector. Check all security feeds. Find the source. Smiled in the darkness. They were looking at their cameras, their sensors, their instruments, but they were looking for an intruder, someone who had come from outside. They were not looking for a dead girl. She moved through the chaos like a ghost. Guards ran past her, heading for the engine room. Technicians hurried to their stations. No one looked at the figure in the stolen uniform. No one expected the threat to be walking among them. The third guard died when he turned a corner and found waiting. The fourth died reaching for an alarm panel. The fifth died trying to run. Felt nothing, no guilt, no satisfaction. They were obstacles. She removed them. That was all. She reached the bridge in 19 minutes. The doors were sealed. Guards stood on either side. They saw her approaching. They raised their weapons. Halt, identify yourself. Did not halt. She did not identify herself. She threw the explosive device instead. The blast knocked both guards off their feet. It cracked the door's seal, pushed through before they could recover. One guard tried to rise. She shot him. The other tried to crawl away. She shot him too. The bridge was chaos. Officers were scrambling at their stations. Screens showed damage reports and security alerts. In the center of it all stood Commander Az, shouting orders. He turned when the door burst open. He saw standing in the entrance, weapons in both hands, covered in the blood of his crew. "Specimen 848H, he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were wide. "You were deceased." "I got better." "This is unprecedented. Your species' capabilities require reassessment." "Let me help you with that assessment," walked forward slowly. The bridge crew backed away from her. They could see something in her eyes that frightened them. "My species holds grudges. We have a long memory, and we take things personally." She shot a console near Ez. The blast made him flinch. "You took my ship. You killed my people. You tortured me for 9 days." Another shot, another flinch. "You put a probe in my brain. You touched my memories. You violated everything I am." She stood in front of him now, close enough to touch. The weapon pressed against his primary cortex. "And then you killed me. You actually killed me, Commander. Do you understand what that means?" Az was silent. His black eyes reflected her face. "It means I have nothing left. No family, no home, no future. You took everything from me." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "So now I have no limits, no boundaries, nothing holding me back." She activated the ship's communication array. Her voice echoed through every speaker on the ship, every corridor, every room, every escape pod. "This message is for every Dominion vessel in the sector. My name is, I am a human. You took me. You hurt me. You killed me." She paused, let the silence stretch. "That was a mistake." She ended the transmission. Az watched her with something that might have been fear. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something, Commander. I want you to look at me and understand exactly what you created." Leaned closer. "You wanted to humanity. You wanted to find our breaking point. Well, you found something else instead." "What?" "You found what happens when we stop breaking." Smiled. "It was the most terrifying thing Az had ever seen. We break back." She knocked him unconscious with the butt of her weapon. He crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Turned to the rest of the bridge crew. They stared at her in horror. "This ship belongs to me now," she said calmly. "You can cooperate and live, or you can resist and die. I honestly do not care which you choose, but choose quickly." They chose to cooperate. Sat down in the commander's chair. She looked at the screen surrounding her. Navigation, weapons, communications. The entire ship was at her fingertips. She thought about her family, about her mother's hands and her father's smile and her brother's laugh. They were gone. She could not bring them back. But she could honor them. She could make sure the Dominion never hurt another human again. She set a new course. The ship hummed around her as it changed direction. Was going home, but not the home she had left. She was going to find others like her, other survivors, other humans who had been broken and put back together wrong. And then she was going to teach the galaxy what humans were really capable of. The Dominion had created a monster. Now they would learn to fear it. The Scourge of Mercy drifted into Dominion space 3 weeks later. It was dark, silent, no engine glow, no communications. It floated like a dead thing between the stars. Recovery vessels were sent to investigate. What they found changed everything. The crew was alive, all of them. They were arranged in perfect rows in the cargo bay, sitting with their backs against the walls. Their eyes were open but empty. They responded to simple commands. They could walk and eat and breathe. But something had been taken from them, something essential. The recovery teams did not know the human word for it. The closest translation was spirit. The crew of the Scourge of Mercy had no spirit left. Commander Az was found on the bridge. He was conscious but silent. He sat in his command chair and stared at a message carved into the console in front of him. It was written in High Dominion script, perfect letters cut deep into the metal. "We remember." He would not speak about what had happened. None of the crew would. They had seen something that broke their ability to describe it, something that lived now only in their nightmares. Was not found on the ship. She had taken an escape pod. She had taken weapons. She had taken the research files on human specimens, and she had vanished into the dark between the stars. The Dominion High Council convened an emergency session. Species 848, designated Humanity, required immediate reassessment. The original recommendation for standard exploitation had been based on physical characteristics alone. This was clearly insufficient. The specimen survived clinical death, the report stated. Duration, 37 of their time units called minutes. This is unprecedented in our records. No known species has demonstrated this capability. More concerning, it continued, the specimen then proceeded to single-handedly neutralize a military vessel with a crew of 400. She used improvised weapons, stolen equipment, and psychological tactics that our forces had no defense against. The High Arbiter reviewed the files with growing unease. How is this possible? These creatures have no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced strength. By every measure, they should be easy prey. An intelligence analyst spoke up. She was one of the few who had survived direct contact with humans. She had studied them for years. She understood them better than anyone else in the Dominion. High Arbiter, with respect, you are looking at the wrong data. Physical specifications are not what makes humans dangerous. Then what does? The analyst pulled up a file, historical records, images from human worlds, humans surviving disasters that should have killed them, humans crossing deserts without water, humans climbing frozen mountains with bare hands, humans walking through fire to save their young. They are driven by something we do not possess, the analyst explained. They call it will. It is not a physical attribute. It cannot be measured by our instruments, but it allows them to exceed their biological limits in ways we cannot predict or counter. She showed another file, records from the Scourge of Mercy, the moment when heart stopped, the moment when it started again. She died. By every definition we use, she was dead, but she chose to return. She wanted revenge more than she wanted peace. She wanted justice more than she wanted rest. The analyst's voice was quiet. She came back from death through sheer force of will. The council was silent. There is more, the analyst continued. Humans have a concept they call pack bonding. They form deep emotional connections with each other. When you harm one human, you harm all humans who care about that individual. When you kill one human, you create enemies of everyone who knew them. She pulled up communication intercepts, messages spreading across human networks, the story of the girl who died and came back, the girl who took a warship with her bare hands. She is not just one survivor, she is becoming a symbol. Other humans are responding to her story. They are angry, they are organized, and they are looking for us. The High Arbiter leaned back in his chair. What do you recommend? Avoid them, do not engage, do not provoke, mark their territory and stay far away from it. We are the Dominion. We do not avoid lesser species. With respect, High Arbiter, they are not a lesser species. They are something we have never encountered before. The analyst looked directly at him. They are prey that hunts back. The council debated for many hours. In the end, they issued a new directive. Species 848, avoid. All Dominion vessels were to maintain maximum distance from human space. No further specimens were to be collected. No further contact was to be made. But it was already too late. Over the following cycles, reports filtered in from across the galaxy. A Dominion interrogation facility on a remote moon was destroyed. All prisoners freed. All guards left alive but mindless, staring at walls and murmuring words in a language they did not speak. A vessel vanished near the edge of human space. When it was found, it was empty. No crew, no specimens, just a message carved into every surface. We remember. Slave colonies in 3 different systems reported uprisings. The slaves fought with weapons they should not have had. They used tactics they should not have known. And when the fighting was over, a human woman was seen walking away from the flames. She was never captured. She was never identified. She simply appeared, freed those who needed freeing, and disappeared again. The legend grew. Humans across the galaxy heard the story of. They passed it from ship to ship, colony to colony, world to world. The girl who died and came back. The girl who made the Dominion afraid. And they began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they did not have to be victims anymore. Other survivors found each other. Humans who had been broken by the Dominion. Humans who had lost everything. Humans who had nothing left but anger and will. They built a network, a resistance, a fleet of stolen ships with human crews and human purpose. They painted a name on their flagship. It was a name that had become a promise, a warning, a prayer. The Long Memory stood on the bridge of that ship looking out at the stars. She was not the same girl who had boarded the Horizon's Promise so long ago. That girl had been soft, hopeful, afraid. This woman was hard, patient, dangerous. But she still remembered. She remembered her mother's hands, her father's smile, her brother's laugh. She remembered the colony transport burning in the void. She remembered 9 days of pain and 1 moment of death. She remembered everything. And she would make sure the galaxy remembered too. A message came through the communication system. Another Dominion facility had been located. Another group of prisoners was waiting to be freed. Turned to her crew. They were humans, all of them, survivors, fighters, people who had been told they were weak and had proved the universe wrong. Set a course, she said. We have work to do. The ship moved through the darkness, carrying its cargo of vengeance toward the stars. Somewhere in the void, the Dominion waited. They had built an empire on the suffering of others. They had believed they were untouchable, immortal, gods among insects. They had been wrong, because they had made one mistake, one simple, fatal error. They had hurt a human. They had killed her. And she had come back. Now the galaxy would learn what humans truly were, not the weakest species, not easy prey, not victims. They were the ones who remembered. They were the ones who returned. They were the ones who never, ever stopped fighting. And the Dominion, for the first time in 10,000 years, had learned to fear. The message spread across the stars like fire. It was carved into walls and whispered in the dark. It was painted on ships and tattooed on skin. It was the last thing the Dominion heard before their world went dark. We remember, we return, we endure. And in the silence between the stars, smiled. The war had just begun.